Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Tied Up in Knots by Karen Knotts, narrated by Karen Knotts. Publisher's note: this audiobook may refer to visual elements included in the print and ebook editions of the book. This book is dedicated to all the nip-it-in-the-butters who come together to laugh and prove what Dad loved to say. A good joke or a funny story can get you through just about anything. Foreword by Betty Lynn, Thelma Lou on The Andy Griffith Show. I remember when Karen was a girl how surprised she was the first time she came to The Andy Griffith Show. She said, "The sets all look like toys." And I said, "You're right, nothing looks real." She had a real good time whenever she and her brother Tommy came to visit. They were darling. Both of them were so cute. They took after their father because Don was so darling. People all said he must have been a riot. Everybody thinks he was like Barney Fife, but he was nothing like Barney. I'd say he was quiet, sweet as he could be. He smiled. His mind was fast. He was thinking of different things he could do. And he loved to write poetry. We loved The Andy Griffith Show, all of us who were on it. We were so privileged to be on that show. When they put a call in for Thelma Lou, I couldn't wait to go to set, because I loved doing it so much. And everybody on it was wonderful as actors. They were all great to work with. And that doesn't happen every day of the week in show business today. I did a lot of movies and things, but the thing that I'm proudest of, really, is being on The Andy Griffith Show. I loved it so much. And Don was so proud of Karen. You could just see by the way he looked at her. When Don left this world, Karen decided to pay tribute to him with her funny, touching show, Tied Up in Knots. The first time she did it at Mayberry Days, she asked me to introduce her, and I said I would be honored. She was so nervous. I said, "Oh, honey, they'll love you just like I do. And I know you're a very good actress, so don't worry about it." And she knocked them dead. I know that's a strange expression, but she did. And I'm so proud to be the first one to tell you about her wonderful book. Preface. In March 2019, just before the COVID-19 pandemic paralyzed life as we know it, I was preparing to perform my show Tied Up in Knots at the Whitefire Theater in Sherman Oaks as part of its Solo Fest. The main subject of the show, like this book, is Dad's career and the relationship between him and me. One of the other solo performers told me she had met Dad, and I interviewed her, Lisa Sosenko. 15 years ago, my husband Gary called me from LAX airport. He said, "Guess who is in the Continental Club and who was flying on the plane back to Cleveland?" I said, "Who?" "Don Knotts," Gary said. No one knew who he was. He looked sad. I got to the Cleveland airport, and then we found him. He was waiting for a ride. That ride was Tim Conway, who was visiting his family in Chagrin Falls. Her story is important to me because it expresses the shock and sadness we often feel when we discover that a famous person from our childhood has become virtually unknown to the younger generation. Over the years, many people have told me I should write this book. I would explain that I had no time, I wanted to pursue my acting career, yada, yada, yada. And that was true, but also Dad was a very private person, and I was concerned I'd be trespassing on forbidden territory. When Dad passed on February 21st, 2006, I became haunted by the opportunity I was missing. Just as the iconic film Back to the Future expresses, many people desire to walk in a parent's shoes for a day. Writing this book didn't allow me to travel through time, but it enabled me to see his life through others' eyes. and I realized I was in a unique position. As the daughter of a famous person, I could locate and talk to strangers who had known him. In addition to preserving Dad's legacy, my interest in writing the book was to understand him, to explore his many facets, and to share his remarkable journey with you. So I took the plunge. When I started, Dad had been gone for more than 10 years, as were most of his closest friends. Fortunately, I had started collecting interviews years before I made the decision to write a book, just in case. I started by interviewing members of my immediate family, my mother Kay and my brother Tom. It may seem strange for me to interview members of my own family, but I was amazed at how much I learned by doing so. I didn't know some of the things Dad and Tom had done together, and it informed me about their relationship. Tom and I began to have conversations about things we'd never discussed, including Dad's fame and our own experience with it. I included my mother's story, too. So many of Dad's fans have expressed interest in her. It turns out that Mother had kept a journal of several events in our family's life, as well as her own, and she gave me access. Thanks, Mom. I soon realized I needed more information on Dad's childhood. I flew to his hometown of Morgantown, West Virginia. I announced on radio that anyone who had reliable information about my father was invited to meet me for wine and cheese at the Hill and Hollow restaurant. A nice crowd gathered and shared their memories, or more accurately, their parents' or relatives' memories. I wanted to know more about his high school days, so I inquired and was advised to go to Jean's Beer Garden on Wilson Avenue. I wandered into the bar, ordered a beer, and started talking about my project. A man said, "Don Knotts! My mother-in-law dated him in high school." I later interviewed the woman, Doris Harner, and she gave me insight into Dad's life prior to his entrance into World War II. Later, when I returned to Los Angeles, I interviewed Dad's friend, actor Al Checo, who had entertained with Dad in the Army show Stars and Gripes. But my greatest Back to the Future moment came when I visited Dad's alma mater, Morgantown High School. Dad had often talked about the school as the turning point in his young life. That's when he really began to channel his charismatic personality and brilliant comedic talent. I was excited when I walked through the door of the school I'd heard so much about. I talked with a former MHS student, Lorenzo Turner, who told me, "When I was 15, I got my summer job at MHS. It was to clean the desks, get rid of gum, and so on. We were in the old auditorium, and carved into the proscenium arch with a knife was the name Don Knotts." I interviewed a gym coach and learned how Dad had used his ventriloquism to flirtatiously engage with other students. And while in Morgantown, I also reconnected with the children of Jarvie Eldred, Dad's best friend in high school. I hadn't seen Judy, Karen, Jenny, or Jarvie Jr. since we were kids, when our fathers introduced us. I continued my search for people and eventually met a woman in her 90s, Fern Hall Geisman, who had been Dad's close childhood friend. She told me how she and Dad, as children, had coped with the difficulties of the Great Depression. After I had exhausted all the connections I could think of, I realized that a great many of my friends had met Dad. When I interviewed them, I was surprised by the interactions they'd had with him. My school friend Gina Black reminded me that her mother had interviewed Dad for a class she was taking at UCLA, and she shared the recording with me. At the Mayberry Days Festival in Mount Airy, North Carolina, I work with the Andy Griffith Show tribute artists, and I interviewed a few about their conversations with Dad. I'm grateful for the fans who continue to participate in Mayberry Days festivals over the years. Speakers have included actors and people like Bruce Bilson, the Andy Griffith Show's first assistant director. Bruce coordinated a visit to the former Desilu Studios, today Red Studios,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?